Good afternoon, students. In this lecture, I will be discussing with you for preliminaries, which will be about Dominican spirituality. But in this particular video, we will not focus already on the timeline of Saint Dominic, but we will focus on Dominican spirituality itself, especially on the four pillars of Dominican life. For our objectives, we shall be focusing on the third objective that is presented in here, and that is to explain the four pillars of Dominican life and how they would relate with each other. Although there will be some time that the first and the second objectives will be taken into consideration for us to better understand these four pillars, but again, this discussion will mostly focus on the pillars of Dominican life. Okay? So I have already had sent you a handout and a discussion on this, especially on the question, who is Saint Dominic? And this question is best answered in the timeline that I have sent with you and I have also discussed in a separate video. So hindi ko na siya uulitin kasi at least we can focus on other things na kailangan din nating aralin. So yan. So now let us proceed to this question. Who are the Dominicans? What is the identity that these Dominicans have? So basically, this identity came from Saint Dominic himself. As these Dominicans follow the way of Saint Dominic. So as you see here, meron tayong Dominican cross dito, na ay black and white cross, tapos parang may bulaklak, parang rosy flory ang ending niya. Because in one way or another, Dominicans are devoted to our Mother Mary. And it has also been claimed that it was through the Dominicans that the practice of the Holy Rosary was being done. So dahil sa mga Dominicans, meron tayong rosary. So as you can see in here, na ay mga rosy part or like flory part on the end of the cross, because that symbolizes Dominicans' devotion to Mary. No? And then as you see this black and white, that will tell us that there is this light over darkness, and then there is good over evil. Because as I have been discussing, what Saint Dominic had brought is light in the darkness. It is truth over falsehood. Kasi nga, meron nga, as sinabi ko pa dati, merong Albigensianism na kumakalat, and this Albigensianism is spreading lies that matter is evil, since these Albigensians believe in two divine principles. And the one that is good is the source of all spiritual existence. And yung spiritual existence na yun, yung spiritual principle na yun lang din yung good. And on the other side, yung naman, material existence or yung matter, nanggagaling din sa other principle, and that is an evil principle. So kaya nga, lahat din ng nanggaling to this other principle, evil din. So kaya nga, for the Albigensians, they do not believe that Jesus had his bodily existence, but that bodily existence is just like a mere a drama, Hindi naman talaga siya nagkaroon ng bodily existence just to show off na meron lang siyang body. Kasi if yes, then these Albigensians could say na okay, naging evil din si Jesus, And if that happens, makikita natin na yung katotohanan sa faith natin mawasak na. Kasi if Jesus did not have a real body, then we can say also na Jesus did not really suffer. It's just a drama. Because hindi naman talaga totoo pala yung bodily existence niya. Okay. So you see how destructive this Albigensianism is. And that's why for the whole of the life of Saint Dominic, buong buhay ni Saint Dominic, inilaan niya talaga upang makonquer and mawala talaga yung Albigensian heresy that had existed before. And yes, because of the Dominicans, led by Saint Dominic, Albigensianism had gone into existence. Nawala gid sila. And we thank Saint Dominic and all the Dominicans, even until today, to really keep on fighting and spreading the truth, because this is very important. Once we don't have this truth in our mind, so basically it is also very hard for us on how to live our lives, because we don't know what is true, what is good, and what is evil. Okay? So that is siguro a glimpse of what we can see, or how we can understand as to this question na who are the Dominicans. So meron ding mga kino-consider na etymological derivation when we talk about this term Dominican, no? So we have this, no, two words, Domini or Domini, which means Lord, and Canis means dog. So in other words, kung i-combine natin yung Dominican, so it came also from these words na Lord's dog. And this was inspired, no? Bakit sir? Bakit may aso dyan? Aso ba si Saint Dominic? So as you see in the picture, di naman aso si Saint Dominic. Pero yung aso na may dalang torch sa bibig niya, na merong umiilaw na torch dito sa bibig niya, as you see in the picture, this symbolizes the Dominican order and Saint Dominic himself. No? Because this symbolism was inspired by the vision of Saint Dominic's mother, that there is a dog. Dog is manservant, or servant of something greater, which sets the world aflame. So in a way here, in a positive manner, the Dominicans become an instrument like this dog to bring about this truth, this light of truth around the world. And yes, Saint Dominic and his followers will serve God, and they had served God, and they had also brought the light of truth all throughout the world. And yes, the vision of Saint Dominic's mother really came true. Okay? So may makita kayong aso dyan na may torch sa bibig, and then meron kayong nakita na tao or saint. So surely that is Saint Dominic, you know? Kasi ito yung nagiging symbol para sa kanya. Okay? Okay. So anyway, we can also know who these persons are, or what is this congregation, if we know some of their mottos. So yung mottos ng Dominican order of preachers, anyway, the Dominican order is called the Order of Preachers. Later, I will explain kung bakit tinawag siyang Order of Preachers. Okay? Sige. First is truth or veritas. So as I have been explaining kung ano yung pinaglaban ni Saint Dominic dati, it is truth. Truth about God. That no, the world is not created by two divine principles, but it is created by only one God. And that God had created everything good, including all the material existence. And that's why we have to take care of our bodily existence and our life and the life of all He had created. Not so much with the Albigensians' tendency na yung pag-suicide, sorry for some triggering term, yung pag-suicide is commendable. Kasi yung body nga natin or yung earthly existence natin is evil and even hell in itself. So ganyan yung pagkakaintindi nila. That's not the truth. So we have to fight against it. So as I have mentioned din, no, in one inn where St. Dominic was staying, hindi siya nakatulog sa pagkikipag-usap sa mga tao doon just to tell them about this truth na hindi naman ganyan. Ganito yung katotohanan. Yung Panginoon, isa lang, siya yung nag-create ng mundo at ginawa niya ang lahat in accordance to His goodness. And all of us is good, or are good, including our bodies. And next is this. I hope you're also familiar with this. Common na siya nga song, especially for those students who came from a Dominican school. No? Kanta-kantahon nga na ini. Laudare, benedicere, predicare. Laudare, we praise the Lord with our saints. Benedicere. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? So yan, isa din to sa pinaka-common na motto ng mga Dominicans. That is to praise, to give praises to the Lord. So which will be then later on, will be so much related also with the four pillars of Dominican life, specifically that is prayer. And to bless, also it is to bless the Lord and blessing others by bringing the Lord to them. Okay? And lastly, that is to preach. to preach both words and actions. So yan yung isinasa buhay ng mga Dominicans. Okay? The truth. So kaya nga, if we try to capsulize the life of Saint Dominic or a Dominican, it's truth. Okay? Okay. And then later on, this praising, this blessing, and preaching. Okay? Okay. Let's proceed. So we have also to take note that Dominican order or order of preachers is one of the four great mendicant orders of the Roman Catholic Church. Ano-ano ba yung mga mendicant orders na meron tayo in our church? Okay. Sige. Ano-ano ba yun sila? First, as I've mentioned, the Dominicans. Second, or the Franciscans. Third is the Augustinians. And fourth are the Carmelites. Sir, kung sasabihin natin na mendicant, ano bang ibig sabihin? So, mendicant orders or congregations are now having a different kind of life in following like Jesus. Because most of the time, especially sa time ni Saint Dominic and prior to him, ang nagiging uso talaga na way of following God is through like monastic life or monasticism, like becoming a monk, becoming alone with God. So ganyan man yung trend dati. But ngayon, hindi na siya naging ganon because naging mendicant na. And in a mendicant order, what is the most common practice or what are the most common practices? First, it is a life of poverty. Second is this communal property or community. Like lahat ng mga pagmamay-ari natin that will be owned by the community. And even until today, lahat ng mga mendicant orders, ganyan din yung ginagawa nila. So nothing of their property is named after a priest or after a religious person, but named talaga yan to the name of the order. And then, yung pinaka-highlight dito, class, sa pagiging mendicant is itong pagiging itinerant. Ano ba yung itinerant? Anong meaning ng pagiging itinerant? So, if you heard about this in sa mga eroplano, itinerary, di ba? So, kung asa ka mo adto, and what place will you go? Kanang na kay mga suruy-suruyan, di ba? Nata itinerary. So, in the same manner, these mendicant orders are itinerant, meaning they are travelers. Okay? They preach from places to places. They do not stay in one place alone. No? Palipat-lipat sila. So these are in our context in the present, na parang makukumpare natin sila sa mga missionaries na pumupunta talaga sa iba't ibang lugar. So unlike sa katong mga monks or yung mga religious people who are practicing monasticism or monastic life, they would stay in one place and pray and work. But for the mendicant orders, usually they travel from places to places to preach the word of God. Okay? So anyway, this Dominican order is founded by Saint Dominic in 1215. Saint Dominic, during this Lateran Council, presented that he may establish this order of preachers. Okay, again order of preachers. Do you know that this name, kaning order of preachers, is a very controversial name, or this order itself is a very controversial one? Bakit? Hindi pa siya na-approve nung pag-propose ni St. Dominic. No? Hindi siya na-approve nung 1215. Why? Kasi yung preaching office or yung capacity or yung authority to preach is only intended for the bishops. Take note that Saint Dominic and his followers, his brothers, are not bishops. Even Saint Dominic is not a bishop. And that's why meron nga Christians dati na gipanglibak ni sila, class, no? Or gilibak si Saint Dominic, giingnan sa mga bishops, mga cardinals na, are you trying to build an order of bishops? So nga na siya kalala, no muna nga big deal kaayo ning preaching sa una because priests before are only allowed to celebrate mass. Okay? They cannot have their personal homilies. Homilies or preaching can only be done by a bishop. Okay, take note of that. And it was only this time in the time of Saint Dominic that it was allowed. No? Kasi nga, Pope Honorius had this dream that signaled him that he should allow uh, Saint Dominic to establish this order of preachers. Okay, and yes, Saint Dominic had been granted, no, in that this Dominican order last December 22, 1216 was formally approved. Okay, and he has served as the master or superior of the entire order until his death. No, siya yung naging leader talaga until his death on 1221. So at least alang gud siya mga 5 years or even less than 5 years kay dali lang gud namatay si Saint Dominic. Okay? So ganyan yung nangyari. Okay. So ngayon, let's try to see some updates, no, about this Dominican order. No, na kung dati yung naging leader is Saint Dominic, so let us try to see kung ano na yung update, no? Especially in our country, sino ba yung leader ng lahat ng mga Dominicans dito sa country, and then sino din yung leader all around the world, no, na naging successor ni Saint Dominic. And mind you, these persons are very interesting. No, why? Because they are so close to our hearts. Okay, in a way that, for example, the leader or the head or the prior provincial of the Dominican province of the Philippines, meaning whole, ha, kasali mga madre, lahat ng mga pare dito sa Philippines, yung pinaka-head is a medtech alumnus in SPC. So you see, di ba, wow, galingan ni Father, no, kuan siya na head, no, and as I have experienced personally, these Dominican fathers are really brilliant, no? Daghan kayog mga like professional na mga Dominicans even before going into the seminary, no? Na gani kaila na Dominican doctor pa siya, like doctor of canon law, and then before entering the seminary he was already a CPA, no? And he had been successful in his career as CPA, no? But now he is serving as a Dominican, no? And he is in charge of the accountancy like faculty in University of Santo Tomas. So that's how capable he is in leading, you know, the teachers and even the students. Kasi by himself, he is a CPA. And meron ding mga, yung previous na successor ni Saint Dominic was MD, no? Medical doctor talaga. No? So kaya nga, he is really good. No? Like, he had been good already in terms of his career in his life, but still he find it essential to really become part of this order, not to preach the word of God. Okay? So, and ito yung isa sa mga pinaka-interesting talaga. No? That currently, the master of the order is a Filipino. This is first time in the history of the Dominicans for more than 800 years. Only this time that it is a Filipino who is leading the whole Dominican order around the world. No? So he was one of our professors, no, when I was still in UST, and I have met him many times. So Father Gert Timoner is a very humble person and is a very jolly person. Sige katawa, kusog kay mo joke. Very brilliant, very intelligent, very sporty. Hilig ka na siya magdula og tennis, basketball, no, because in his stature pod, no, kay dili mo siya ingon nga gamaton nga because he is a 6-footer person, no. Tangkad-tangkad is padre mo nang hilig mo siya sports, and like during one of our retreats when he was the facilitator, grabe, nindot kay like keen kay yung memory, like how do siya explain, no, like point for point, and it's very easy to understand, and it is really like kanang like drawing us to Him and to God. So that's my experience with Father Gert. No? And I would really believe that yes, he is so much worthy to be the master of the order. Although, as he had mentioned, hindi na nga niya masyadong maisip kung bakit siya. No, kasi sobrang dami pa talaga ng mga Dominicans, mga magagaling, mga mababait. But he was the one chosen. Okay? So yan. So much with that. Okay. So before going into those four pillars of Dominican life, I would just like to highlight four things. Okay. First is, as what I have mentioned kanina, no, that it is through Saint Dominic that the authority to preach or like having a homily during the mass or even outside the mass preaching, was extended to the priest. Okay, so like during this time, meron na talagang preaching faculty yung mga pare. It's because of Saint Dominic. Okay. And secondly, the task of the Dominicans is to preach and convert the Albigensians. And yes, they were successful on this. Okay, praise the Lord. No? Na ngayon, hindi na nag-exist yung Albigensians. Kasi if nag-exist pa yung Albigensians, so maybe sobrang nasira na yung simbahan natin. Or sirang-sira na siguro yung pananampalataya natin. Because we are already believing in lies in a sense. If these Albigensians who are also pure, no, especially in their practice, kuya po kay sila, na po sila yung mga gina-practice nga austerity, like di po kay sila mudaghan og kaon, no, na po sila yung mga kanang magtiniil nga way, no, kanang makita natin na they are really living this life of poverty, simplicity, and everything. But what's wrong is mali lang talaga yung pinaniniwalaan nila, and it could really affect the authentic faith that we have, the faith that Jesus had given us. Okay. And then next is they evangelize the non-Christians in northern and eastern Europe. Okay, in the lands of the eastern Mediterranean and in India. Okay, and even in the Philippines, no, dumating talaga sila dito. So basically, they have been very instrumental in the Christianization of this land na mentioned dito. Okay? So that is how influential these Dominicans are. Okay? And lastly, that these Dominicans live a life of contemplation and ministry. Okay? So later on, I'll be explaining more this life of contemplation and ministry. Okay? Sige. Okay. So now we have to proceed with this question. Kasi I had already introduced you to that question, who are the Dominicans, and hopefully yes, you were already introduced as to who they are, okay, and who is their founder anyway. Okay, sige. What is Dominican spirituality? In simple answer, no, as you can read in the screen, simple ra gid kaayo, Dominican spirituality is a way of life of following Christ that is inspired by the life of Saint Dominic. You have to remember that, again, it is Christ. Christ pa rin yung kina-follow, ha? But we follow Christ through the way of life of Saint Dominic. Okay? And this way of following Christ, like through the inspiration of the life and spirit of Saint Dominic, this is done to grow in love of God and neighbor. Okay. So kasi nga, if we will go back to the two major commandments of God, like of Jesus himself, that is to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our soul, with all our strength. Okay? And it is followed by to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And in St. John's Gospel, it is said that we have to love our neighbor as Jesus loved us. Okay? So yan pa rin yung ginagawa, no, ng mga Dominicans. No? But specifically, meron silang 4 ways of doing this, okay? Which will be later on elaborated in the 4 pillars of Dominican life. Okay? So besides growing in love for God and of neighbor, ano ba yung primary work of the order? So nga basic man kaayo nga grow magita in love of God and of neighbor, especially if we really love God. No, parang nagiging necessary na yan eh. Parang nagiging package na yan. It simply follows. But when I talk about the specific mission or task of these Dominicans, no, as to expressing this love of God and of neighbor is this. That is to preach the gospel for the salvation of souls. Okay? So nagpe-preach yung mga Dominicans for the salvation of souls. Just for the salvation of souls specifically. Like, ito talaga yung highlight. Sir, bakit ano talaga issue masyado yung salvation of souls dito? How about the present life we have? Hintayin pa ba natin na mamatay then we will be saved? Okay, so we have to remember that in the context of Saint Dominic, the ideology or the common understanding of faith or of life itself is it is on the afterlife, or what matters most is the life we will be living with God eternally. Ganyan kasi yung concern. And it is very important for us to be living with God in heaven. Okay? Because not to live with God in heaven, especially our souls, if our souls will not be in heaven after we die, it's the most tragic thing to have. Siguro, the best way to help people be with God like in eternity is to let them know about the truth. To let people know about the truth is the greatest thing that one can do, because that opens greater possibilities, like rich possibilities of people being able to live with God later on. Because if people don't know about God, siguro in one way or another, it people has this lesser possibility of living with God in heaven later on. Okay? That's why dyan talaga nagfo-focus si Saint Dominic and kanyang mga followers that in this world, we have to like live with each other, preach this gospel, live out the commandments of God, like love each other, because in this way, later on, we can all be saved. Okay? So we have to preach this good news, this truth for us to be there in heaven. Tayong lahat. Later on. Okay? So siguro, another way of understanding this is, hindi lang naman may experience ng soul yung salvation or yung heaven in the afterlife. Because even at the present, no, even at the present, we can experience heaven by loving God and each other. Kaya nga, no, one of our patron saints in SPC, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, Saint Therese of Lisieux, she mentioned, no, that I will spend my heaven doing good here on earth. It's a very beautiful thing to be reminded of, that yes, heaven is here, God is here. Okay, so because in a general sense, heaven is a state where God is. Heaven is where God is. Okay, so we are saved when God is with and in us. So yan yung pinagsisikapan ng mga Dominicans, that hopefully people will have God in their lives and later be saved like from time to time. Okay? So yan. Napasarap ata yung usap natin. Parang dugay-dugay ito na human. Okay. Sige. So dito na tayo, no? Dito na tayo sa 4 pillars of Dominican life. So anyway, we are on the 17th slide out of 46. Dagan-dagan pag din. Okay, advertise lang. Okay, sige. Thank you for listening. I hope wala ni mag-skip. Bahalag dili kayo nga naka-engage or bahalag na board na mo. Okay, sige, let's proceed. Okay. So the 4 pillars of Dominican life are as follows: prayer, study, community, and ministry or apostolate. Okay? So iisa-isahin natin yan so that we can understand them better. Okay? Are you ready? Thumbs up daw. Wala unday mo, no? Sige. Okay. So let's begin with prayer. We have to remember that Dominican life or Dominican spirituality is a life with God. Again, Dominican life or Dominican spirituality is a life with God. It's living this way of life of Saint Dominic as how Saint Dominic had followed Christ. Basically, it's about man and God. Okay? And that what prayer connects. It's man and God. Yung Panginoon at ang Diyos. Okay? So ngayon, let us try to see prayer in a deeper manner. Let's try to see prayer in a deeper manner. In a way that the Dominicans understand what prayer is. Okay? So in simple terms, prayer is simply talking. Okay, simply talking to God. No, siguro most of us had understood prayer in this manner. Na kapag nakikipag-usap tayo sa Diyos, meron tayong sinasabi sa Panginoon, that is prayer. And maybe sometimes a little bit of listening. So not akong i-close and open parenthesis because most of the people understand prayer as talking to God. Like rarely as listening to God. Okay? So another thing that we have to consider is that prayer is an encounter with God. Anyway, encounter is a much deeper term. It's not just simply talking, it's not just simply listening, but when we say encounter, it is like experiencing God. Siguro, if you have this encounter of your friend, naman siguro may mga kanya-kanyang encounter of a friend, either positive ba na ang encounter or negative ng encounter, but yes, those like siguro meetups, events are encounters. So yung mga encounters na yun, especially with your closest friend, siguro napakaganda nun. Napaka-meaningful, napaka-valuable, napaka-memorable. Kasi encounter eh. Hindi lang siya plainly usap-usap lang, hindi lang plainly nakikinig ka lang, but siguro you experience each other, siguro you try to embrace that friend, try to hug each other, or you do things together, okay? Or like you just share things together. It's a very beautiful encounter that we can remember with our friends, with our family. Okay. So ganyan din yung parang image na gusto nating maintindihan when we talk about this encounter with God in prayer. Okay? And in this encounter, in this communication, we have this divine and human relationship. Ano ba yung divine and human relationship? So as I have mentioned ganina, it's between man and God. When we talk about prayer, it's man and God. This is a way that we develop this relationship with God. And it is a way that we can deepen this relationship we have with God. So we pray. Okay. Sige. So let us go deeper into this topic na prayer by going into these three elements of Dominican prayer. What is this three elements of Dominican prayer? First, it's fully human. Dominican prayer is fully human. Second is it's Eucharistic, okay, referring to the Holy Mass, okay, or Misa. And third, it's contemplative. Okay, so let's go with the first one, that prayer is fully human, or prayer must be fully human. So siguro we have to answer this question. What makes our prayer fully human? Okay. So prayer becomes fully human when we try to combine the activity of the body, mind, and spirit. What does this mean? Ano ibig sabihin nito? Okay. In contrast with the common practice that is, kani usually is, kung mag-pray ta, usually yung ginagawa natin is like siguro like trying to afloat our mind, no? Like it's just mental activity, like siguro thinking about everything that we want to say about God. Like usahay gani silent prayer lang ta nga mag walang like atong mind lang nakigstorya sa Ginoo or naminaw sa Ginoo. So in a way na parang mental activity lang siya. Okay? So hindi involved yung body. But in the Dominican tradition, hindi lang ganun eh. It's not just siguro practice of the mind or practice of the word, no? Nag-istorya ganun mo like orally. But now in the Dominican prayer that is fully human, it is to be highlighted that we have to engage the totality of ourselves in worship. Totality of ourselves in worship. Like siguro ang question na po is what makes ourselves total? How do we engage our total self in prayer? Okay. Ay, nindot nga example ani. Ah, there was this church, it's in US, though hindi siya Catholic, but they have this worship, no, practice of worship. Usually, daghan jud og naga-practice of worship even until now, no, especially Protestant Christian churches. Okay. So yung ginagawa nila, yung practice nila sa church nila is to have this praise and worship every Sunday. Nagakanta-kanta sila, sayaw-sayaw, jump-jump, and all. So makaingon ta nga, sir, oh, di ba sir, oh, activity of the body, oh, sayaw man. So, gana. Pwede na siya, pwede. Then, sir, naampoy mind, di ba sir, kumukanta ka, magkuhan gid mong mind, ana. Then, words pa gid sir, oh, napagay mga gesture. So, paano mga ginakanta usually nga, jump kaayo. Oh, through you, I can do anything. So, may ana. So, kanta-kanta, sayaw na kaayo. So, paano mga kanta, dira nga uso kaayo, no? So, they've been doing that. But, blessed as they are, na sila'y good kayo nga pastor, keen observant na pastor. And their pastor observed that parang ano na eh, parang may something wrong na. May something wrong na. Kasi na-observe niya na yung mga youth, mga teenagers are just siguro enjoying the music, enjoying the rhythm, like the beat, ambak-ambak lang, ana-ana. And parang may kulang. Siguro, like, in a way, nawala na sila sa focus. Kasi they are now into music and lesser into God, into Jesus. Yeah, that's why sinuspend muna yung tawag dito, sinuspend muna yung praise and worship nila. And ano, for months, ano yung ginawa nila? Instead of singing songs, like having that worship activity, they just have moments of silence. Moments of silence lang. At the start, syempre, siguro na-hurt yung iba. And then, naglain ang buot. Nadyo uban nga, wala na nanimba. Because they were not able to understand nga bakit tinanggal yun. Nag-enjoy naman kami. And we're happy to do that. We're happy to praise and worship God. Then, later on, they were accustomed to it. Gradually, unti-unti nilang na-appreciate yung silence. Unti-unti nilang natutunang mahalin yung silence. No? In a way that later on, by themselves, they realized that, Lord, meron pala kaming mali. Meron kaming kamalian. Kasi, dati, we are too much focused on the external factors. Like the music, the lyrics, the beat, actions, gestures, and everything. But it's not the totality of ourselves that encounter you. No? And that's why after that realization, no, they have talked with their pastor, and the pastor also explained, after a very long time, nag-explain na yung pastor bakit ganun yung ginawa niya. And you see, merong napakagandang output eh. Napakagandang output na pangyayaring to. No? And it's that output. I don't know if you've heard about the music na yung Heart of Worship. That song was composed by the people who experienced that. Yung way of that pastor na for a very long time, silence lang muna. And yes, later on, nung bumalik na sila ulit na mag-worship, kumanta ulit, sumayaw, it's a really different thing. It's another story to tell because now they know that the center of this is Jesus himself, not the music, not any other else. Not even myself. Maganda yung anindot kayong lyrics mo, anak dito na, I'm sorry, Lord, for things I've made it. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship. The heart of worship is Jesus himself when we encounter him by the totality of ourselves. No? So ganyan kaganda yung worship if we know we're doing and who we are encountering. It's not just anything, but it has to be God. It has to be God. Okay? So yan. Ganyan din eh sa Dominicans, no? Anak po ng practice. Although na ay mga praise and worship, etc., make it fully human, but we have to be reminded of the reality that we have to worship God in the totality of ourselves. Okay? It's only him. Okay? Okay. And that's why for the Dominican tradition, prayer is not just a mental activity or exercise, but it's an intimate, personal conversation with God, which was expressed in the unity of mind and body. Take note, intimate, personal conversation or personal encounter with God. So talk about intimacy, it is like telling us na close na kaayo ta. With the people whom we are intimate with, those are the people who are closest to our hearts. So Dominican prayer must be like that. A life of prayer must lead us closer to God. Okay? Okay? So I would love to share one complete example as to how this activity of the body can express this relationship or this love in terms of relationship. There is this man, the name of P.K. Mahanandia. He was very famous because he was the man who rode a bike from India to Sweden. And if you'll imagine gaano yan siya kalayo, it's 6,000 miles. No? Sobrang layo. Sobrang layo niyan, no? 6,000 miles or 900 gani og nabunturan sa mo 90 kilometers na. How much more if 9,600? I think I have to rode my bike like 100 times back and forth, Davao and Nabunturan. Kaya ano ba yung pinunta ni PK Mahanan dyan sa Sweden? In his experience, nag-avail mo na siya fortune telling, and it was told na he will meet his partner in Sweden. And because wala naman siyang perang pang pang travel, like yung mga luxurious way of traveling, like yung mga barko or airplane or other forms of transformation. That's why PK just started riding his bike, and he was also an artist. No? Along his rides or journey, he will just be painting something for his living. No? Hanggang dumating siya sa Sweden. And when he was there in Sweden, no, meron siyang customer na babae. No? So yung customer niya doon, yun na din yung naging wife niya. Sana all. So nagkatuluyan talaga sila. No? So kasi ganahan po mo mag-bike. Sir, mag-bike na lang ni Sir B. Bike asa mo padulong. Ito. So that's the story, no? Like, it's not just words, but doing something for what we love. Although hindi niya pa nakikita or nakita yung someone that he would love later on, but he was sure na mamahalin ko siya, makita ko siya. And yes, nakita niya talaga. No? This is a love, a concrete way, no? Like loving in a very concrete manner, like expressing our love in a very like siguro a little way that we can, although lisod siya, but then we're doing all this for the person we love, or the person that we will love. No? So muna nga kamo kung naamay mga single ri daghan pag single. So just do things that could better yourselves, no? Because that's the greatest way, like, to love your partner in the future. Because becoming the best version of yourself is the best gift that you can give to your husband or wife, if you want to have also. Okay, so yung anak lang. Okay, so that's becoming fully human. Okay. Okay, next is this. Okay, prayer as Eucharistic. Ano ba yung nakakapa-Eucharistic sa prayer natin? Prayer is Eucharistic when we bring all our prayers, lahat-lahat ng mga concerns natin, lahat-lahat ng mga gusto nating sabihin sa Diyos, dadalhin natin sa misa. Simple rin kaayo. Sir, bakit kailangan pa nating mag-attend ng misa? Bitaw, no? Ano bitaw? Simple lang gid kaayo ang answer na class. Do you want to receive a gift? When we are young, we're very excited, especially during Christmas season, because in that season or in that Christmas day, we receive so many gifts. Di ba? Ganahan kayo mo? So, maningil din sa ninong o ninang. Okay? But now, especially sa mga naay mga friends na kusupod bang hatag or naay mga loved ones, excited na kayo na sila nga naay celebration, birthday lang, guys, kung birthday in. Okay, kung birthday, daghan o gifts. Okay. And all gifts that we receive, kino-consider natin na beautiful and important. Right? I just don't know if meron bang naka-receive dito na worst jud kayo mga gift na marag luod jud kayo marag jud kaganahan. Basta sinog na yung anak mo nung naglagot ka na naka-receive sa gift. But in general, when we talk about receiving gifts, it's a beautiful thing. Okay? And it's a great experience, and we love to have that. So siguro if we look at the Holy Mass as a gift from God, actually the most beautiful gift, kasi it is the most concrete time that we can receive God, can receive the Son given by His Father in the breaking of the bread. Di ba? Nindot kayo. So muna nga, ang Holy Mass, ginatawag siya og Eucharist. Or you, meaning beautiful, and charisma, gift. Kasi nga, it is a wonderful thing that we receive from the Father, that He had even sacrificed His Son for us. And it is commemorated in the celebration of the Holy Mass. It's a commemoration of love of the Father for all his children. And to commemorate an act of love is a beautiful thing. Okay? And that's why as Dominicans, yes, it's important to pray like personally, alone, siguro in our mga kwarto. But it's best if after saying all those things, like alone, we offer this together in the Holy Mass. No? So kaya nga, no? In the Holy Mass, naagit yung mga parts, no? Like for example, ganun, offertory. In the offertory, it is a very symbolic thing. Kasi we try to offer all ourselves, even our liberty, the work of our hands. No? Like, kaya nga, kinoconcretize siya by siguro like dropping some donations or offerings or like giving like kaning mga buhing mga halad. Because that concretizes our way of offering everything to God. Muna nga, mukanta ta na, kunin at tanggapin ang alay na ito, mga biyayang nagmula sa pagpapala mo. It's a beautiful thing that as we receive blessings, now we try to bring all this back again to God in the Holy Mass. So kung sa English po, nindot kitong kanta po na. Take and receive, O Lord, my liberty. Take all my will, my mind, my memory, all things I own, and all I own are thine. Like even our freedom, with the Holy Mass, we try to offer this back to God because all things we own is His. No? It's the beauty of the Holy Mass. Like, okay. So one thing that I could also highlight in the celebration of the Holy Mass is the singing of the Our Father. Sometimes it may seem too ordinary kasi nga parang nagiging ano na nga siya parang nagiging ano bang tawag dito? Ceremonial na siya masyado kasi okay, this is the time that we hold our hand, kakanta tayo together. But if we try to go back to the meaning of the Our Father, I would really believe that this song is the best song to prepare us before we receive God. It's the best song to prepare us to receive God. Like even with the first two words in this prayer, no, maingon na Our Father. Isa din hanang Our Father, sir. Okay. I have to remember that Our Father is the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, no? His apostles, his disciples asked Jesus na, Lord, how to pray? Teach us, Lord, how to pray. I have to remember na nung time ng mga apostles, nung time ni Jesus, people cannot call God Father. They cannot even mention the name of God. And that's why, as they will read their sacred books, it will just be like mentioned in another way. You know? Like instead of saying Yahweh, they will say Adonai, the spoken word for the name of God. Kasi they would really believe that they are not worthy to say the name of God. Okay? And having that kind of thinking, that mindset, that unworthiness of like calling God in His name, how much more if you call God your Father or our Father? Diba? It's a very controversial thing to say. So after hearing these words, no, kasi besides the disciples, meron ding mga taong nakinig kay Jesus to how He taught them to pray. So, naglabad ilang ulo. Sila, how come this person would dare to say, Our Father, that we, no? cannot even mention the name of God. So, di ba? Wala nga, what is Jesus trying to teach us anyway? It's not the words in the prayer in itself, but it's our attitude to prayer. Ano? Tinod na sir? Yes, tinod na siya. Because when Jesus used the words, our Father, Jesus is telling us to consider God as someone dear to us, someone very intimate to us, someone who consider us as his children. Kaya kung sa una, the relationship between the Israelites and Yahweh, it's a very kaning murag good kanang duty bounded relationship siya in a way. In terms of intimacy, hindi talaga natin siya makita. And that's why people before are praying, but hindi ganun ka-close sa Diyos. Or hindi ganun ka-intimate prayer nila. Because basically, in a sense, people are like looking to God as someone very powerful, almighty, na halos hindi na siya malapitan. Even in the Old Testament, we see people like seeing the light of God in the tabernacle or in the Holy of Holies. They cannot exit alive, but they will die. That's how they see God. Parang hindi masyadong approachable. You have to remember that God is a God who takes care of his people, who loves his people so much, even providing us his son. And that love of God in the person of Jesus is completely manifested in the holy sacrifice of the Holy Mass. Sa muna nga nindot kaayo ang Our Father, before ka mo receive sa Holy Communion, mo pray kag katong Our Father, although layo pa man siya, but this an opening part to that Holy Communion. We consider ourselves children of God before we partake of that gift. Dami mo kayo sa feeling nga mudawat ka og kanang regalo gud, dawat kag regalo. Kabalo ka nga you belong. Like it's a very hard struggle for people na ganing pag abot nimo sa ng na ay times na you feel that you don't belong, but still you try to insist yourself to be part of it, no? And even if you receive something from that group, but then hindi ka naman talaga fully accepted as who you are and you do not authentically belong to that group. It's a different thing. That's why when we say Our Father, it's an acknowledgement that yes, I belong and I'm ready to receive this gift. Because it's a bread. Okay, sige, so much with this Eucharistic. So again, as Dominicans, it is really very important to really take part in this Holy Mass. Kasi nga, in the Holy Mass, we receive the most beautiful gift of Jesus himself. So greatly. Okay? Yeah. And next, this. Okay. So, the last part of prayer is having this contemplative prayer. Ano ba yung contemplation? It's somehow like meditation. Ganun. But it goes deeper. Because when we talk about contemplation, there is this element of having someone. And that someone is God. To contemplate is to share something between friends. It's a mutual sharing. And the goal of this practice is to enjoy each other's presence. In other words, when we try to contemplate, we just enjoy the presence of God in us. Sir, do we need to say something, sir? Pwede, pwede. If you enjoy talking something to God, yes, you may do so. But if you also enjoy more of just simply listening to God in silence, then we do that as well. Okay? So, ganyan naman eh. We have different ways of contemplating and of praying. And that's why when we talk about contemplative way of praying, no, balik na naman. We talk about contemplative way of praying. It is like living in prayer. Ito dapat ang naturally suda ng living in prayer. In a way that as we live our daily lives, we are always aware that God is with us, that God is present with us. If we study, especially like for example, exam, no? Exam ninyo karon. When you have this contemplative prayer life, you try to study with God. You consider studying as part of your prayer because it's a way that you communicate with God. It's a way that you connect with Him as you discover different truths or as you review the truths that you have learned already. And as you do that, as you study, or as you pray before you study, you just simply enjoy that moment with God. Or even like, meron kang ibang gagawin. Like for example, you travel. Like, punta kayo ng, ano siguro, Rayas Peak. Yung sa pinuntahan namin last week. Yung gikalintura ko. Okay. So when you travel and then you see the wonders of God's creation and then you get reminded of God and then you enjoy the view and His presence, it's already a contemplative way of life prayer. So, no words. Hindi na kailangan ng words. It's enjoying the presence of God in everything that we do. That is a contemplative way of living. Okay? So, ganyan. Napakaganda, no? And every time na meron kang na-experience, whether good, bad, joyful, or sorrowful, everything, you acknowledge God, God's presence, you find God in all things. That's a contemplative way of life. So, wala na sir eh. Maybe, basin lisod, pero this could be learned. Okay? Okay. I think we're done with the prayer pillar of the Dominican life. So ano nga ulit yung tatlo? First, it is a prayer should be fully human or completely human. Involve yung totality ng pagkatao natin. Not just a mental activity, but activity both of mind and body. Intimate. Intimate encounter. Next is it should be Eucharistic. It should be centered on the Eucharist or the Holy Mass. So all our prayers be brought to the celebration of the Holy Mass. And the Holy Mass must also be the center of our lives. And third is contemplative. It's living our daily lives or having our prayer, always acknowledging the presence of God in everything that we do and in all things. Okay? Patay sir. Gaya na ni sir. Uy. Prayer pa lang sir. 2 hours naman. Bitaw no. Sige, padayon ta. Halag, dugay mo kung ano. Sorry, guys. Okay, sige. Hapit na jud, hapit na jud. Sige.